Anybody else get a bit of post-fall depression? You know, it's funny, after the fall and between winter, sometimes it can get a little bit confusing as to what to photograph. You know, once you see peak fall color in an area, every week after that, you're just like, it used to look a little bit better, used to look a little bit better. And it can get a little bit confusing between, fall and winter, what to photograph. So I've come out to a local area, one of my favorite local areas, that it's at the lowest elevation. It's 327 feet above sea level, so it's pretty low. And I'm hoping, in theory, that the fall color might still be around. There is a little bit more than I thought, but you can tell it is definitely past peak fall color. And in this video, I want to share with you what I like to do between fall and winter to kind of keep the creative juices flowing, and also why I really stopped using my wide angle lens this year. So when I first got started with outdoor and landscape photography, I really only had, I shouldn't say really, I only had one lens, and it was a 55mm prime. And I absolutely loved the lens. It was a beautiful lens, and I used it for everything for almost the first year. And I got really, really used to and got very comfortable with that focal length. But then I started to realize, you know what, that's not really a typical focal length for landscape and outdoor photography. It's more for portraits, really. So once I really started to fall in love with this genre of photography, I was like, you know what, I need to go out and get a wide angle zoom. So I did a ton of research. I found the best one for me that I could afford at the time. And I bought it, and I was super excited about it. And come to find out, my photography actually got worse. And I really, really struggled with this lens, or with this focal length, and I didn't understand why until now. And that light kind of coming through the canopy of trees is pretty nice right now. I'm actually surprised how much fall color is still left. I mean, we're definitely way past peak, but there's still a fair amount out there, plenty on the ground. So one of my favorite things to do between fall and winter, let me sit down here real quick, is to, I know I struggle, honestly. I think a lot of people struggle with what to photograph between fall and winter. And one of the things that I love to do is find a tree, like I have found right here behind me. Find a tree that still has some decent color on it, but don't really photograph the tree, but look beneath the tree, look at the canopy of the tree. And more than likely, some of those nice fall leaves that are still on that tree will have fallen, and you can photograph those. So I like to think much smaller between fall and winter. So not really using, wide angle lenses or mid-range zoom lenses or even telephoto lenses. I think macro lenses are absolutely fantastic in this kind of transition time. And I really try and think as small as I possibly can and pay more attention to what's on the ground as opposed to, looking at eye level. And that usually not only sparks a lot of creativity, changes things up a little bit, but a lot of times it can yield some amazing results. So I found this leaf right here. It's got a, whoops, right there. It's got a little bit of dew on it, not a ton, not very nice water droplets, almost just like a little puddle of water there. But it's one of the things that I love to do, and you can almost always find some decent, nice fall color beneath these canopies of trees. Just find a vibrant tree, look on the ground, and more than likely you'll find something. And I don't own a macro lens, but usually this time of year, it's actually the second year in a row now where I rented a macro lens, and just to use it for maybe a month. I don't do enough macro photography to really justify the purchase of a macro lens, so I just rent it for just a little bit of time and then return it after I play around with it a bit. But this is a great thing, one of the many different things that I like to do in that transition time between fall and winter. So there is the leaf that I found, just kind of sitting on this nice log. It's got a little bit of dew on it, a little bit of water, so that's a nice touch. And I'm just kind of zoomed all the way, not kind of, I'm zoomed all the way in here. And I'm just taking a series of photographs, just focus stacking, just kind of moving my focus point all the way through the scene. Probably end up having to take 8 or 10 since this is a macro lens. Just try and get everything in sharp focus. But this is a perfect example of just finding a nice tree that's got still some decent fall color on it, and just focusing on the canopy beneath it, because it's a little breezy out, there's leaves falling everywhere, so it's not hard to find some vibrant leaves. Once the leaves fall for a few days, they turn that kind of brown and ugly color. But when you get the ones that just fall off the tree, that's pretty nice. And I'll turn this around here so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But here is the tree that I was talking about. Not a huge tree, but it still has some nice color on it. And then I'm literally sitting right beneath the canopy of the tree. And it's not hard to find some decent fall color that way. So after you find some nice fall leaves on the ground to photograph, something else that's fun to do is look for mushrooms. I know it depends on where you're at in the world, but where I'm at, this is probably the best time of year to photograph mushrooms, especially after a little bit of rain. It's been a few days since we've had rain here, so these aren't the most ideal conditions, but I love to look for logs or trees, dead trees that have fallen down. And you can almost always find some kind of interesting growth. And what's really nice is to use a really shallow depth of field and kind of throw out the background focus, but the background is just, nice fall colors that are usually just leaves on the ground. But once it's just kind of sticking with the theme, just walking around with handheld right now, just looking very small, focusing very small, looking down on the ground, which is completely the opposite that I normally do throughout the year. So it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to kind of shake things up. So I'm going to keep foraging around, looking for some mushrooms here. So we landed on this right here, which is just kind of like your quintessential post-fall scene. Just mostly dead leaves on the ground, a few that have recently fallen, but somewhat decent arrangement here. But it's there's just something very, I don't know, I find it beautiful actually, and it's just overall simplicity of the scene. I didn't find any mushrooms yet that I really enjoy. It's just mostly these leaves I've been kind of focusing on. At the same time, just somewhat looking for the mushrooms. I'm not sure if I'm going to find any, but there's something very relaxing about this style of photography when you're thinking very small, because I feel like it's a lot easier to frame these types of scenes up because the amount of real estate, if you will, or the focal range or field of view, I should say, that you're using is very, very small. So it's much more relaxing. Plus it's a nice change of pace to be kind of looking down a little bit as opposed to always kind of surveying up here. So it's something totally different. And a quick little macro tip. Actually, I don't know if this is a tip or not, but I do very little macro photography and I don't really find, I can't justify the cost in buying a macro lens. So usually this time of year, maybe a couple weeks into spring, I'll just rent one. I'll rent a very, very good macro lens that I would never normally buy and just use it for a few weeks, have a little bit of fun with it and then return it. And then whenever you get the itch to do a little bit more of macro photography again, just go rent one, but save the money. I can't justify spending thousands of dollars on a macro lens and I'm only going to use a few times a year. Well, how about that for perfect timing? While the search for mushrooms continued, I was walking by this beautiful tree right here. It was an incredible texture, and there was this nice leaf that was just kind of just stuck right on there. And as I'm photographing it over, and I'll show you it on the back of the camera here, I think I got through enough focus stacks to get it all in sharp focus, but a subtle wind came by, and I kind of looked down for a second, and I looked back up, and it was completely gone. But it was really nice while it lasted. I'll show you right now. I'm thinking of a square crop, and I took maybe 10 different focus stacked images all the way through the scene. But I really like the kind of curly Q nature at the top up there, and I like the color contrast, and just all the detail in that leaf was awesome. So when I got back from my trip to the Dolomites last week, I was going through Lightroom and I was just kind of looking through a lot of the photos that I captured, or I should say a lot of the metadata for the photos that I captured in 2023. And to my surprise, I was really shocked by which lenses I used most often this year. And the lens that I used least often, only 12% of the photographs I captured in 2023 are with my wide angle zoom, which was so funny because that was the lens that I used to use most often for many, many years, but it seems like every year over the last 3 years, the percentage of photographs I use with that lens seems to go down lower and lower and lower. And I think that, let me just come over here and sit down for a minute. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, I really struggled when I first got a wide angle zoom. It's because the field of view is so wide, which means that it's capturing a large area, which means you have a lot of things in your frame that you have to position in a very attractive or pleasing way. And the more things you have in your frame, the more difficult that is. It's just a numbers game. I also felt like wide angle lenses, at least my photographs that I first was capturing with it, kind of lacked focus a little bit because there was so many items in the scene. And that was really what I struggled with. And I still find that I struggle with that sometimes. It's almost, I guess I find a wide angle lens to be a little bit limiting sometimes because the situations where a wide angle zoom works best are not situations that I encounter very often. Every once in a while, sure, I still love it when using it in a vertical orientation, when you have something very interesting in the foreground and something nice and dynamic in the background. But those kind of scenes are few and far between, at least the places that I travel to. So that's really why I think I haven't used, or I practically stopped using my wide angle lens this year. It's just, it's just limiting and a lot of things you have to put in your frame. And I found it to be kind of difficult. I think there's ants over here. But nevertheless, and probably one thing, my biggest issue with a wide angle lens is what it does to things in the background. You always get this kind of shrinking effect of mountains or just everything in your scene. It just really loses that grandiose nature. And that's kind of why over the years I've slowly gravitated towards longer focal lengths. And the focal length I used most often this year was my 32 to 64 on a medium format. On a full frame, it's like a 24 to 70. It seems to be a very versatile lens, and it's just something that I really enjoy, framing up those types of images, and I feel like it's very conducive for creating focused photographs. I found this nice kind of something unusual I haven't seen much of are these ferns right through here, and then some fall leaves kind of nestled all over these ferns. I kind of like the color contrast it provides, and I'm kind of down here in this, I guess, little bit of a wash or a creek area, and it's moist. I came down here because I was hoping to find the mushrooms, and I'm not going to leave here until I photograph one mushroom. I'll sleep here if I have to, but I'm going to find one. But I came down here because it's a little bit damp, a little bit moist, in hopes to find them. But I found this little area right here, which I kind of like. A little bit of moisture on the leaves, which is always a good thing. A little bit of water droplets, which is adds for a little bit more detail to the overall scene, which is nice. Let me just reduce the exposure a bit so you can see this, remove the settings, but that's kind of how I have it framed up right now. I really like just kind of the overall, it's kind of got this like circular shape to the overall scene, which is quite nice. And of course the color contrast is not too shabby. So a real quick point of clarification, I have found quite a few mushrooms, but none that I find to be very attractive, or just the placement of them or the things in the background aren't very attractive at all. A lot of times I'll just show you real quick. Here's a good example right here of what I have found. So all of these types of mushrooms, which they're just not super exciting, and in the background is just not super exciting either. It's just kind of chaotic mess. But I've found these to be all over the place here, but just nothing that gets me too excited. So I'm gonna keep looking. How about this for tripod placement right here? Straddling this little area. I found this nice, just kind of super stagnant water, and all the oils from the leaves create this beautiful like shimmer and shine. And it's something that's very different from what I've already captured today. Let me show you what it looks like on the back of the camera. It looks quite different. Let me just flip this screen up a touch here. There you can kind of see it right there. Yeah, kind of like I don't even know what the word is. I just like the look of it. It's just the oils have this nice kind of like shimmer, a little bit of sheen to it. It just kind of creates just a nice complementary look to what I already have captured today. Because my hope is that I'll be able to come up with at least 3 photographs that I can kind of put together and kind of create just like an overall story of just a nice morning out in these post-autumn conditions. So that's kind of my thought track of what I like to photograph after fall and before winter. I like to think small, rent a macro lens. I won't fall off this log. Rent a macro lens, get out there and just look for small details. Like I said earlier, I really only do macro photography in the post-fall, sometime in the spring, but it really is a nice kind of creative change, if you will. It's not something that I would do all the time, but it is a great thing to do to just kind of break things up. And when things maybe in your local area are past fall and they're looking kind of boring and you're getting a little bored and you want to get out with your camera, just start looking down, maybe rent a macro lens. But and also that's wanted to share why I really haven't used a wide angle lens this year either. I thought that that was pretty interesting. I didn't think either topic was enough to really warrant a dedicated video, so I wanted to kind of combine them two together. But I hear often about the struggles with wide angle lenses, and you're not alone if you're struggling with it. I struggle with it all the time. It's not an easy thing to do. The wider the field of view, the more things you have to arrange in your scene, and the more difficult it is. So you're not alone. So in an effort to save you all some time in your day, I'm not going to bring you along any longer with me scourging these woods for mushrooms, because all the ones I see are not even worth A, photographing, and B, putting in a video. So I do hope you enjoyed this week's video and did get some helpful information out of it. If you have any questions about anything covered here today, please leave those in the comment section below, and I will definitely get back in touch with you as soon as possible. As always, if you enjoyed this week's video, if you could, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and as always, I really do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to spend it with me here today, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.